Hello, and welcome back to the Be More Connected Summit. I'm your host, Elise Preston, and today I am so excited and so honored to be here with Aki Hirata Baker. Hi, Aki.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, and I'm so excited to dig into our conversation today.
Me too.
So, Aki, I'd love to start by just checking in and seeing how you're doing today and how you're feeling in this time of self-isolation. How are you holding up?
I'm counting my blessings for sure. Overall, I feel extremely joyous, and I think I'm feeling this I have this feeling of joyousness, really, because in the face of all that's happening, because I'm really realizing how alive I am. I was alive 3 weeks ago very well, but then, when you face something, there is something to take note. And I'm really understanding what it means to be alive, and how grateful I am. And then also at MINKA, we really have been using this word, physical distancing. Mm-hmm. And also one of our sisters actually coined this term, healthy boundaries instead of self-isolation.
Yes.
Because language is very, very important. And powerful. I think powerful. And I think powerful in the sense that if we actually really think about it, each word has resonance, and that resonance actually creates that reality. Mm-hmm. And how we describe our situation and the way we are, or whatever it is, we are actually putting ourselves into that reality. So this idea of co-creation of reality is not that far-fetched idea, or not that kind of woo-woo thing. It's just really simple. Yeah. So, at MINKA Brooklyn, we actually really take care of our words. And without being a word police, I also don't want to be that either. I want to be free. I curse a lot, and I don't want people to be telling me what to say, what not to say. And we also kind of think about the intention behind each word and how we use that, because I think that's our responsibility. So, from that standpoint, I'm just really thinking about this time as just practicing. We all are practitioner of spiritual tradition of some sorts. And, speaking of MINKA Brooklyn, we run the gamut of all sorts of different practices. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we are all dedicated to the future that we haven't seen before.
Yes.
And the future we haven't seen before can only be created by dismantling what's actually happening. And I think this is really giving us that time, because we have, for the past thousands of years, actually from the tradition that I study, 625 years, because that's the one era. We have lived in a very tangible way. Mm-hmm. Right? Sensual, tangible, manifested way of reality is how we have lived. And now we are shifting. The prophecy actually states that the very beginning of that next era is next year. So this mm-hmm. is no surprise to me or to people, a lot of the spiritual traditional people. It's what's expected, and it's just giving us this teaser of what it means to go internal to work, to connect internally.
Yes. And I think that it's so important that you were talking about the fact that we are really in this big transformational period, and the spiritual prophecies have predicted it. We've seen this coming, and even in the more tangible, logical, scientific world, they're speaking about us making this transition from the information age to the conceptual age. And what does that look like for the future of work, and mm-hmm. how we conduct ourselves and how we interact mm-hmm. with one another. And I'd love to hear from you about how this is showing up in your work, and how this is having an impact for MINKA as you are looking to the future.
So, we do things quite out of box at MINKA. So I guess if we were to look at the practice side, through my healing journey, I have, I've been doing this work for 20 years. It's because I've been suffering all my life, right? And my suffering is subjective. So I cannot say my suffering equates to or as severe as some other folks suffering, but suffering was suffering for me. So I have always been sick. I have always been depressed. My life was kind of crazy. It was, I would call it a perfect mix of chaos. Within that, I realized that we have been trained to think that we only can have one thing that works for us. Right? A lot of the times people, you would say like, oh, how about you try this? Oh, that's just not me. Oh, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. But how do we know it's not me when we don't read, when we only use 10% of our brain, right? And because we have been conditioned to think that we think so linear in a linear pattern, then what we have created in this place is that we just brought in practitioners of all sorts. So then every person who walks in here as a client or even as a practitioner will be exposed to many different traditions and practices. Because in that, and we also look at it as a collaborative healing. So then a lot of our tradition, a lot of our practitioners refer clients to each other. And in that way, then clients will say, well, you know what, I never thought of it that way, but I'm going to try it, right? And that's one way of kind of like unboxing a lot of this idea of this is what healing has to be like, because my healing path will not be your healing path. We all have different healing paths. So really kind of like my thinking was, how would that look like as a place? And this is continue to evolve, obviously, because again, I'm only using 10% of my brain. So the more experience I have, then more of the unboxing that would happen. So as I grow, as the collective grow, then that's continue to unfurl and unfold into something that we haven't seen before. And that's really what we are doing as of now, and that's what we were doing before. And also as a business structure, of course, we are a traditional for-profit business, but we actually run as a collective. So, you know, a lot of the decisions are made not by me. People often call me like, oh, you own MINKA. I was like, no, I started MINKA. I had the idea of having MINKA. I don't own MINKA because it actually has been made by so many people's effort and energy, and it continues to do so. We have different teams working on different things. And I actually think if we were to create a new reality, we have to do that in every sector of our lives. And that's also how we make our money, right? And we have, because I say, you know, you actually asked in one of the questionnaires, like, how is it that social justice and healing should be a part of each other, that you asked, right? Because it's actually all one thing. We have been trained in this Western way of thinking, that we have been trained to look at things as a segment. This is my work life. This is my relationship life. This is my personal spiritual life. But the thing is, it's just life.
Right.
It's just life. And if we were to really think about that, it is my responsibility and it is our responsibility as a place of healing and wellness and spirituality to really zoom out and see what the real problem is. And the real problem is white supremacy. Real problem is patriarchy. Real problem is the toxic capitalism were born out of those.
100%.
And I cannot sit here and say to anyone that I do healing if I don't look at those things.
So important. Yeah.
And because then if I'm not looking at it, if I'm not basing our practices based on that, then we are re-perpetuating what has been built for us before, because we have not taken down and decolonized all these ideas that's so ingrained. And this undoing is daily, right? because we live in it. So yeah, that's kind of how we have been using this time as a center. I mean, we're not doing anything different, actually. Only thing we are doing is that all the meetings are on Zoom.
Right.
And taking all of our offerings to online, which I was so hesitant. And then in that, I realized that I was like, oh, shoot, this actually is an access. Because I know that like a physical connection, being in a certain place is so beautiful. And so I didn't want, it's healing, and it's beautiful, and it's such there's magic that happens that cannot sometimes happen in the online connections. But then I realized, I was like, oh man, this is also an accessibility issue, to make it accessible for folks, because people do actually contact us from West Coast or other country, like, I want to join, but I can't come.
Right.
But now then we can say, well, actually, you can come.
100%. And that's I feel like such a prominent part of this moment. I guess I can only speak to my own experience, but it's like this paradox that there are so many things so many doors that are being opened, new potentials, new possibilities, while at the same time we're feeling this loss and grief of being in space with each other and being in each other's company and just having that comfort of the old normal. I loved the way that you were speaking about unboxing healing and really allowing MINKA to be a space where there is this radical inclusion where all people are welcome and all people are seen and honored for who they are. And I was reading a bit, and I love that MINKA in Japanese means home of the people. And I think that is also deeply connected to the decolonizing work that you were speaking about, making sure that we're intentionally working to undo and be presencing and be conscious of the fact that we've all been conditioned by patriarchy and capitalism and racism and sexism, and how do we create new spaces where we're not bringing those harmful systems and structures along with us.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautifully said, right? And I think we also have to be, and this is where it gets so tricky, because we are home of the people. And when it's home of a people, we are extremely radical in our belief, but we are not exclusively LGBTQ center, or we are not exclusively beings of Black and brown bodies center, right? So I think in some ways that we are doing things in a way that is so, I guess in some ways it's crazy hard in some ways.
For sure.
Because how do we honor the need for Black and brown bodies to gather only as Black and brown bodies, while the center remaining to be a home of people that all wants to shift and change? And how do we have that conversation? Because a lot of the times when we are in affinity space, the conversation we can have can be very, very radical.
100%.
And when we actually have to have a conversation in a mixed group, then we actually have to kind of take steps back, because our perception of realities are so different.
Yeah.
And so the conversation has to be had in a way that is really carefully crafted, and also kind of like having a little bit more patience around it. And I have moon in Aries, so patience is definitely not my it's a virtue I'm working on, but it's not something that came
naturally.
So
yeah.
it just did not come to me as an innate thing. So I'm definitely learning. But this year, so again, this is an evolution of a business, right? And business as an entity that can bring harmony to the overall society, not as an extractive force of business building. And this year, we have decided that every person who are going to be a practitioner here has to be trained by People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And
that's so powerful.
Yeah, you know, for a minute I was like, is it like, can I do that? Can I tell everyone that they have to do that, even though they are all independent contractors essentially?
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that there are so many other wellness and healing centers that doesn't tell them to do that. So, I mean, if that's not what they want, then they can go
find
somewhere
another
else,
space.
I guess,
mm-hmm.
you know, and so we are home of the people, but we are not for everyone. And we are okay with that.
Yes.
You know, because our ethos and aspirations are very, very concrete. And that's also evolving ethos and aspiration. That's why it's an aspirations, because we haven't all gotten there yet. That we are very much integral to that. And, you know, navigating what it means to have a business that way.
Yes. And I think that is so powerful. I didn't realize that. So this is practitioners and staff are all going through the Undoing Racism training from the People's Institute.
And you know, I have been trained by them many times over now. And the first time I took this training was when I was in food justice work. And it has really gave me this power that I did not realize that I needed to have.
Yeah.
You know, as an immigrant, as an Asian person, they have given me this primer, and this years ago, they gave me this primer to, and again, this is continuously unfolding, but what it means to be grounded in your work, to make sure anti-Blackness doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can actually make sure that anti-Blackness is not happening in your organization or in your collective, what you are doing is the decolonizing of the really base block. I can do anti-racism work based on, you know, anti-Asian sentiment. I can, but that's actually not going all the way.
Right.
And I think in some ways, I'm kind of like efficiency nut in a way. The reason I did food justice work when I was in the justice work was because I thought that was the core basic thing that I can tackle on in order for things to change. And I realized, actually, no, it's the spirit that needs to really to be worked out. That's really the core thing. So that's kind of the reason why I'm doing the work I'm doing now. Yes. But in essence, it's actually doing the same thing.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. The vehicle is different, but for me, what is the most efficient way to get to the shift of the humanity? And that, to me right now, and I think it always will be spirit.
Yes. And I think that it is so impressive and so incredible the way that as the leader of this organization, you've been able to really do that difficult, challenging, confronting work of bringing decolonization to the forefront. And that is such a powerful example for so many other leaders in the wellness space and also just the business world at large, because that's going to be the work that is going to allow us to really shift and change the systems and structures that we live within. If we're able to really look within ourselves and confront the bias that we've been conditioned within, and being able to actually really acknowledge on a deep level where we are still living or acting as an oppressor. And then also that deep spiritual work is so healing and so necessary and so important as well. And I'd love to maybe talk a little bit about your own journey of healing and what's gotten you to where you are today. I feel like we touched on that a little bit, but I think it's helpful for people who are starting on this spiritual journey to have some examples and to be able to touch into what that looks like.
So I grew up in Japan. And I grew up in, and now I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I grew up in a very patriarchal country, yet my household was very matriarchal. My great-grandmother is a widow. My great-grandfather died. He was in the Navy and he died in the Japan-Russia war. And she raised 4 daughters all by herself, doing everything from farm work to construction work to, and, you know, because it is a patriarchal country, you know, she didn't inherit anything. She just had to make do. And because she didn't have any son, what happened was that my grandfather married into my house per se, because it's family lineage. And that's who my grandfather and grandmother is. And we grew up in a traditional Shinto household where everything was tradition, but it was strangely devoid of the talk of the spirit, even though we were doing spirit work. And being that my makeup is always looking for something unseen to be acknowledged and understood, I was always looking for something. So then I tried Christianity, I tried, you know, yogic practices, I tried a whole bunch of different things, but you know, in that strange mix of tradition versus tradition devoid of spirit, you know, what I have started to develop was this deep sense of loss and depression, right? But that was also in my family lineage. I lost my mother to depression, and my grandmother also tried to commit suicide by lighting the house on fire with my aunt and my mother in it. So there's a lot of there's a deep lineage, and I call it a legacy of depression. You know, we all get legacies from our family. My legacy was the depression and anxiety. But you know what a beautiful lesson it was, because without that experience, I wouldn't go this deep into my spiritual practice. I wouldn't go this deep into my healing practice. And I have always been sick. I didn't go to 1/3 of my kindergarten. That trajectory just continued on until I was 36, 37. So 6 years ago, I think now it's 6 years ago, I had this really, really depressive episodes, and I was suicidal. I was nursing this 10 months bronchitis that just does not go away all at the same time. Yeah, that was painful. But that kind of was the epitome of what my life looked like for the past 36 years or so. And at that moment, it was so bad. So I had to just stop everything. And the only thing I did, and thank goodness for my partner, right? My husband really supported me through that. And so when I was doing that, I did everything to therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. That's something really helped me. DBT is what the people call it. I also used pharmaceuticals because I was so low. I did not have any kind of energy to get anything new going. So that was another thing.
Sure.
And my mind was okay. But when I did flower essence, that's when my reality shifted. Like my mind was doing okay with those things, but my reality shifted when I started doing flower essence sessions. So that really definitely changed my life. And then also at the same time, and this is how crazy life is, right? I met my flower essence therapist because she was an assistant to my acupuncturist that I was seeing for my bronchitis.
Wow.
Because if I didn't go to acupuncture session every week, then I'll be getting sick again. So I was almost like, that was the only thing that worked. And that's how I met my flower essence therapist, right? And then because that acupuncture, I started to understand is an energy medicine. And I also thought that as much as I love acupuncture, I didn't want to be dependent on it for the entire life, right? I didn't want to be like, oh, well, I can't go to vacation because if I don't go get acupuncture, I get sick again.
Sure.
So then I started to research, and I found this very particular type of tapping of the acupuncture points to do an energy healing, and it's by this teacher named Donna Eden. So I had 10 months of bronchitis, right? And then I obsessively did this exercise for 2 days, and I have not gotten sick ever since.
Whoa.
I know. So that made me a believer in, okay, what's this thing about energy? Because like you said, I studied Ayurvedic medicine, hatha yoga, meditation, you know, dietary change. Like I studied all these things prior to this, because I thought that if I can get my mind and my body right, then things will fall into place. Only thing that I couldn't quite get my mind around was this etheric body.
Sure.
Because we don't see it.
Yeah.
But then because I was so at the end, what do you call this? Like end of my rope? I was really at the end of my rope. I just didn't have anything else to go on. I felt like I tried everything. I mean, I was taking antibiotics and I was changing my diet, and I was just like, I just don't know what's going on. And you know, there is the birth story of my healing practice. I mean, I always had healing practice, but this really fundamentally changed the focus of my practice.
Yes. And I think that right now we are all able to really feel and sense how incredibly important our energetic state is to our well-being. And we're noticing it in ways that we may not have before because we were just moving so quickly through life and not slowing down enough to be able to actually feel ourselves. And I think that this transition time is absolutely bringing forth a lot of grief, a lot of pain, a lot of collective anxiety, and a lot of things that are really, really challenging for folks. But it can also be a window or an opportunity for some shifting and some transformation. And I'm wondering if you have some hopes about what kind of transformation this time could possibly inspire.
I mean, you know, people think I'm crazy, but I'm actually excited. And also, you know, I have practiced for a long time to look at things as an yes and. This is very much an activist type of a mindset practice that you do. But I do this in all of my life, yes and. So I don't negate anything. So if something arises inside that's seemingly contradictory, it's not contradictory, it's just they both exist. That's why I feel them. Right. So for me right now, this is such an important time. It is such an important time that you can really viscerally feel the shift happening. And, you know, for those folks who actually can get to that place in their mind, I want them to take this opportunity to really enjoy this moment, that it will not going to come, according to this traditions, another 6 6,625 years.
Oh, wow.
I have a teacher in Toltec tradition, and each era is 6,625 years.
I see.
And the beginning is next year. So we have been going through, since the 1991, we have been going through this tremendous change. And that tremendous change actually coincide with the rise of the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And what that actually means is that, so we can only make things that we have within ourselves. So, and the era for them alternate from externally oriented to internally oriented. Yes. So you can imagine the past 6,625 years has been an external.
So external.
Orientation, right? Colonization, Western medicine, academia, like all the power is outside, like religion too, like power resides outside of ourselves, right? Yeah. So now we are learning, and we are also learning, and this is going to have a split, I'm pretty sure too, is that we are learning how to harness that power internally through the use of technology. Because what's happening is that, you know, people are like, well, I don't believe in energy medicine. And I say to them, do you not believe in Wi-Fi?
Right.
Right. When people send you fax, do you receive it? How do you think it's sending, right?
Yeah.
So it is actually the same exact concept.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can start to unbox ourselves and seeing things only in this segment, in that segment, what you start to see is this vast network that's working, and that has been working, that's more subtle, that you actually get to be in touch with, you know. And you know, during this time, I also really want folks to remember how much that we have been given. The idea that, you know, we go to work, we make money, and then we get food and da 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 da. But if you were to really think about it, how is that food grows, right? Yeah, farmers work for it, but essentially you put a seed in the soil, and the nutrients of the soil and the water and the sunshine actually grows the food.
Yeah.
Farmer's job is to maximize the yield and take care of it. But at the end of the day, all of these things are actually given to us. And I think just the even idea of when you inhale, there's an oxygen. We think that's so normal, but it's not normal anywhere else. If we were in Mars, we don't have that.
Totally.
So to be in this human body, to have this experience, to know that so many things have been worked out for us, that really gives this grounding that you can start from. Yes. And also so there is this one thing that my anti-racism spiritual godmother tells us. Her name is Milta Vega Cardona. She's a co-trainer of People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. But every training she would say, it is not who I am, it is that whose I am that matters.
Beautiful.
Right? And when we can really think about that, whose am I? I am a being that's being supported by so many forces around me. And I am the testament of the resilience of my ancestors. Yes. We talk about ancestral traumas, but we don't talk about ancestral resilience.
Not enough.
Not enough. And that ancestral resilience and the reason that you are here, the reason I'm here, is the testament to that resilience that they have bestowed in us, in our flesh and bone.
Yes.
And when we can actually really think in that way, that reciprocity that goes on without us seeing, then you get to understand why it's okay to relax right now.
Giving ourselves more grace and permission.
It's okay to take that time to get in touch with that power, because it's fascinating to me. It is just absolutely fascinating to me that somehow, this person whose great grandmother is a widow, and my grandmother and my grandfather didn't even go to anywhere beyond middle school, and have crippling anxiety, and end up being here in New York because I needed to get the hell out of there.
Sure.
But the reason I needed to get the hell out of there was not to hindsight, not because I needed to run away from my heritage, but to reclaim my heritage in my own framework.
Wow.
I feel I am a way more Japanese now than ever, even though I may not look that way for people. I feel I'm traditional in a way that's grounded in the ethos that I truly believe in.
Yes.
That I can finally claim my, spirituality, which I don't know what it is as a form yet, because I said I grew up in Shinto, and the issue there is that Shinto was the vehicle of racism and colonization in Asia. So I call Japanese people like a conquistador of Asia, because that's what we did. And how do we understand my spirituality in that framework?
Sure.
What is the work that I have to do?
And it's so complex and it's so layered.
It's so many layers, right?
Yeah.
And I practice Reiki. And Reiki actually do have a colonization ties too, because there's a strong tie to the Japanese Navy.
Sure.
Now, does that make Reiki evil? No. But can we ignore and say, no, because it does good thing, we don't have to think about that? No, that's also not true either. So how do we really think about this understanding of unity and a oneness in a way that doesn't just benefit me, but truly understanding the connection? And if we are all one, then your hurt is just as painful to me as my own pain, because that's really what oneness is. And when you can really ground your work in that level of oneness, then the social activism has to be a part of your spiritual practice.
1000%. And I think there's so much that you said that was so powerful. And I feel like we could go into the layers of that forever. And that piece about oneness, I think, is so important for us to really be prioritizing more and bringing to the front of our mind, because it is really something that is disregarded in Western culture. And we have been glorifying competition and fear and separation and greed, and that's in our bones in a lot of ways. So even being open to the idea that we are all connected to each other and we're all responsible for each other and we all can be providing collective care toward each other feels so foreign, and it feels so strange and uncomfortable in a lot of ways. And so I think it's so important that we start having more conversations like this to be getting in touch.
And I think I love that you brought that point, because it's foreign to what we have considered to be an intellectual point of view, right? I grew up in Asia, so this is not the reason I'm realizing that why this is not foreign to me is because this is how we grew up. So because we have Confucianism, that's how you say it, that's ingrained in us. So we are part of the collective, and our whatever we do have to feed into that collective value.
So powerful.
And this is not to say when it goes to the extreme, that's not good. I mean, that's part of the reason that I left, right? Because I felt like I was erased as an individual. But I think to that point of oneness, what we really have to do is to look to the indigenous leaders, because they have talked about the oneness as part of the practice. That's the way of
thousands
life.
of years. Yeah.
So you know, for me, one of the things that I really want to be a part of and committed to is to bring the voices of these indigenous elders and practices, not by putting the faces of white people. I'm just going to be blunt.
Sure.
We have done this for many, many times in this wellness industries. All the experts they're white. Let's just say.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, you know, other things happens, but most of the time it is all white.
For the most part. Yeah.
For the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that means is that these traditions has been popular for the past 2-3 decades. And because of the way that our society has been structured, they are continually putting white faces as the authority figures of these practices and these belief systems. And I have a strong apprehension, that's mildly to put.
For sure.
and we need to give respect, and quite honestly, we need to give money to places that is due.
Mm-hmm.
They have continuously published books and published videos and all these things saying that they have learned it from somewhere, yet that these folks are not being compensated for.
Yeah, and what does that look like to really begin to have a reciprocal relationship where if you are taking or using, appropriating, however you want to call it, practices, that you're actually providing some kind of compensation for that use.
And you know, I think quite honestly, most people don't even say where they have received these informations. And I think a lot of times they don't even know where they come from. So we have this class called Roots of Our Practices, which is a beautiful, beautiful practice of understanding and kind of like parsing out, okay, what does it mean for me to practice this thing in my body? And you know, I think there are some group of thoughts that says that if you don't come from that tradition, you should not practice that. I don't actually belong in that club. And it's partially, that's going to be very hypocritical, because what I practice has so many different lineage, and I actually have studied from so many different practitioners of color, and I use all of them. So if I were to say, and also this is where I have to be very careful. That also goes against this idea of oneness. Again, so this is where, that's right, this is where we have to really hold this yes and concept really tightly here.
Yes.
Because our mind is so tricky. So we can always try to make things that works for my own selfish ego a lot more easier than other ways, right? So I have to really understand where is it that I'm honoring and where is it that I'm appropriating. So there's this understanding of appropriation versus appreciation.
Yes.
And that starts to change as you go deeper into your practice, right?
And it's such a
because it's a really fine line. And because without any of these practices that I have had the pleasure and the blessing of learning, without them, I wouldn't be here either.
Sure.
It took all of that to get to this place. So, you know, again, I guess I should say, take Roots of Practice workshop. what this really is to have a deep self-inquiry practice, because that's what spiritual practice is. It's the application of the practice that you study, right? Studying is an intellectual aspects of your spiritual thing. Practice is the thing that makes it embodied.
And that embodiment piece is everything.
It's everything. Like, you can know all sorts of things, but if you cannot be it, and that's also the thing that I kind of talk about in the social activism thing. People start activism as a love to the community, love to the future. Like, I almost feel like it's like making love to the future that you haven't seen yet. Like, you want to give birth to this creation that you yearn for. That's really what activism is. But what you see on the surface is the anger.
Oftentimes,
only the action and the productivity and the push and a push and a push. And what happens is then you actually don't see the love anymore. And when you don't see the love, people don't resonate. People just only repel by the anger or the push. But how do we be that love? Because that's what you started with. And that's why the healing has to be, and it is the integral part of social movements.
Yes.
Because of that piece. Because if we can't heal our wounds and transform our angers and frustration and all of that, what we show up as is not who we really are. The true intention of the activism that we actually work towards.
Yes. And it's makes it so much more difficult to inspire others from that space if the energy, the frequency that we're emitting is one of anger and distrust and upset versus that exciting future vision that we are in love with and that we want to see. And I think it is so understandable. I mean, there's a lot that's fucked up that needs to be fixed. So it's not shaming anyone who's in that space, because I've definitely been in that angry space as well.
No. I actually think that recognition of anger and frustration is needed and necessary, because that's when you see the injustice that's happening, then that's the first reaction that we should be having. But I think this patriarchal reality and production mindset reality that we have lived in pushes us to move that feeling aside and just focus on the productivity. And to take time, the audio has that beautiful quote, right? It's caring for myself is not a self-indulgence. It is an act of self-preservation, therefore it is a political act.
Yes.
I don't think I quote it exactly, but that's what paraphrasing is. But what that really means is that when you can truly understand what it means to decolonize, then you understand what it means to take time for ourselves. And that's actually us taking ourselves out of that hamster wheel of production mindset. And that in itself, that act in itself is the decolonization.
And it's radical and it's necessary.
It is.
And
it's hard to do.
It is incredibly hard to do.
And actually it is hard to do. That's why it's important to do it in a relationship and in the community. Because we all have to do the work that we do within ourselves, but it's hard to do it when you are by yourself. Or
if you're with others who are pushing another agenda.
Right. So, but the thing, the paradox of this is that the more work you do on yourself, for yourself, then the people around you who used to not believe in that will start to believe in that, because you are emanating that example that you are. So, in a funny way, to do the communal and relational healing is, again, to do your self-work.
Right. And it starts there first.
It starts there first. So it's almost always the same thing that what you're doing. It's just like how you look at it changes the way you see it. But in all aspects, what we really are just doing is to making sure that we are going deeper and deeper into our own self-inquiry and the work that we do with spirit or whatever else you would call it, right? You might not call it spirit. That's okay. Subconscious, other realms, other dimensions. But we have to be rooted in the fact that we are human beings given the earthly bodies right now. That is your purpose. And that is, your purpose is not to escape and go somewhere else to do that work. Your purpose is here right now.
Your purpose is here right now.
Right now.
So essential for all of us to hear. And I love to ask all of our guests, what does being more connected mean to you?
You know, I will bring back that quote again. It's not who I am that's important, it's whose I am. And being more connected comes from that understanding of whose I am and how I have been lifted up and how I have been cared for. Therefore, then I have the capacity to connect more. The more I am who I am and knowing whose I am, then I have more to give, and I have more to connect with. And I think the more work that I do, the more I realize that what I say doesn't matter to me, to people. You know, yes, I'm running my mouth and talking about things, but at the end of the day, when you see me, if you cannot sense what I'm saying as a lived experience, that means nothing. And to me, to be that takes tremendous amount of connection with my own self and my lineage and all that supports me, and starting strong from that place.
Yes.
And I think in the age of social media, you know, I mean, I get in that bandwagon too sometimes, that I feel like I need to be connecting with other people. I need to do this, I need to do that. But at the end of the day, when I step into a place, I just want to make sure that I am connected to who I am, whose I am. Therefore, that folks can fully connect with me, because they see the truth of what I am. And I want them to be able to connect me with that and to that.
So powerful. And even in this virtual space, I so powerfully can feel your energy and your passion and your vision. And it's been such an honor to be able to connect with you today.
Thank you.
And I would love if you could share some information about how this audience can stay connected with you.
That's right. Okay, so we have a very active Instagram. MINKA Brooklyn as a center is at MINKA Brooklyn, all one word. That's what it is. MINKA is MINKA, MINKA Brooklyn, regular spelling. Personally, my Instagram is Soul Flower Medicine. And our website and my website is all the same, minkabrooklyn.com or soulflowermedicine.com. And yeah, and we would love to stay connected with you. We are actually creating a bunch of online content, and we are also creating a membership option. So folks can just like invest in $1 a day or something like that to take as many classes as you want on virtual space. And I think that's really something that folks need right now to keep inspired and just use this time as a beautiful time of self-reflection and learning and healing.
Yes. And thank you so much for being here today. Just from our conversation, I am feeling energized, inspired, lit up by everything that we were talking about in terms of connecting with ourselves, connecting to spirit, really being able to live in the world in a way where we're making love to the future that we want to see, and really being able to step forward as leaders in the world with this new and bright vision. And
Well,
so,
thank you for doing this work. You know, this is you're making love.
yes. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. And I hope that everyone will be tuning in tomorrow for our next set of interviews. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.